In a distant part of the galaxy, far beyond Earth's solar system, Captain Ethan Cole stood quietly on the bridge of the U.S. Vanguard. His ship was one of humanity's most advanced vessels, equipped with cutting-edge technology and weapons. The crew around him worked silently, their eyes glued to their screens as they approached an unfamiliar fleet. These ships were massive, towering structures that seemed to blot out the stars behind them. Each one bore the emblem of the Galactic Empire, a powerful and ruthless regime known for conquering countless civilizations. The tension in the air was thick, but Ethan remained calm. He had faced danger before, and his steady demeanor helped keep the crew focused. Beside him, Lieutenant Rachel Monroe adjusted her console, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. Her sharp eyes scanned the incoming data, trying to make sense of the situation. "Captain," she said finally, breaking the silence, "their lead vessel is hailing us." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "Put it through," he ordered, his voice firm but composed. A large screen flickered to life on the bridge, revealing the face of Commander Victor Drex. He was a tall, imposing figure with cold, calculating eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. His expression was stern, and his tone carried an unmistakable air of superiority. Without any greeting or formalities, Drex spoke directly. "You are in Imperial space," he declared. "Surrender your ships immediately, or you will be destroyed." The words hung in the air, heavy and threatening. The crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. This was the moment they had feared, confrontation with the Empire. But instead of showing fear or anger, Ethan did something unexpected. He chuckled softly, a small smile playing on his lips. The sound was faint but clear enough to be heard by everyone on the bridge, and by Drex on the other end of the transmission. Drex's brow furrowed in confusion. "What is so amusing?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. Ethan leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto the screen. "Your threats," he replied simply. "If you think a few big ships and some tough talk will scare us, you're going to have to do better than that." His tone was calm but laced with confidence, leaving no room for doubt about his resolve. Rachel glanced at Ethan, surprised by his boldness, but also reassured by it. She knew the odds were against them. The Empire's fleet was much larger and more heavily armed, but Ethan's unwavering attitude gave her hope. Across the bridge, other crew members straightened up, feeling a renewed sense of determination. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for humanity's place among the stars. On the screen, Drex's expression darkened. He wasn't used to being dismissed so casually. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had expanded its reach through fear and domination. No one dared to laugh at them, or even stand in their way. Yet here was this human captain, treating their demands like a joke. It infuriated him. But there was also a flicker of unease in his mind. Could these humans really pose a threat, or were they simply foolish? Ethan didn't wait for Drex to respond further. "We'll take our chances," he said firmly, cutting off the transmission. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge silent once again. Ethan turned to his crew, his earlier amusement replaced by steely resolve. "Prepare for anything," he instructed. "They won't back down easily, but neither will we." As the crew sprang into action, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. Humanity had come a long way since its early days of space exploration. They had faced challenges and dangers, both from within and outside their own world. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity wouldn't bow to tyranny, no matter how overwhelming the odds. And if laughter could unnerve their enemies even for a second, then Ethan was happy to let them hear it. The U.S. Vanguard moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. Back on Earth, news of the encounter between the U.S. Vanguard and the Galactic Empire spread quickly. People gathered around screens in homes, offices, and public squares, watching live updates from reporters who struggled to piece together what had happened. The tension was palpable. Humanity had known about alien civilizations for decades, but most of those encounters had been peaceful or neutral. This time, however, it was clear that the Empire posed a real threat, a dangerous and aggressive force bent on domination. At Central Command, Admiral Laura Hayes sat at the head of a large conference table, her face serious as she addressed a group of key personnel. Among them was Dr. Daniel Carter, a scientist with a reputation for solving impossible problems. His work in quantum mechanics had already revolutionized human technology, and now all eyes were on him to come up with something, anything, that could give humanity an edge against the Empire. Beside him sat Lieutenant Emily Grant, a young but brilliant technician who assisted Daniel in his experiments. Laura began by outlining the stakes. "The Empire isn't just here to conquer territory," she explained. "They want control over our resources, our technology, and ultimately, our freedom. If we let them win, humanity will become nothing more than slaves to their regime." Her words sent a chill through the room, but she didn't stop there. "But we've faced extinction-level events before. Asteroids, plagues, wars, and every time, we've found a way to survive. We've grown stronger. This Empire may be powerful, but they don't know who they're dealing with." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, his mind already racing with ideas. He had been working on a prototype weapon designed to disrupt enemy shields, but it wasn't ready yet. Still, he believed it held promise. "If we can perfect this," he said, gesturing to a holographic model of the device, "we might be able to disable their ships long enough to strike back effectively." Emily added, "It's risky, but if we can scale it up, it could change the game entirely." While scientists worked tirelessly on new technologies, Laura authorized covert operations to gather intelligence on the Empire. Operative Chris Bennett volunteered for one such mission, posing as a traitor to infiltrate an Imperial outpost. Chris was calm under pressure and had a knack for blending in, making him perfect for the job. Disguised in worn-out clothes and carrying forged documents, he docked his ship at the outpost and began gathering information. What Chris discovered shocked him. Hidden deep within the outpost's archives were records showing that much of the Empire's advanced technology had been stolen, or rather, adapted, from designs originally created by humans centuries earlier. It seemed that during humanity's early days of space exploration, some of their inventions had fallen into the wrong hands. Now, the Empire was using those same innovations to try and crush humanity. Chris knew this information could be crucial, so he risked everything to smuggle the data out. When he finally returned to Earth, battered but alive, Chris handed over the evidence to Laura and her team. Daniel studied the data carefully, his eyes widening as he realized the implications. "This frequency," he said, pointing to a set of numbers on the screen, "it matches the resonance pattern of our shield-disrupting weapon. That means they're vulnerable to it." Laura leaned forward, her expression sharp. "How soon can you make it operational?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "A few weeks, maybe less if we push hard." Time was running out, but humanity wasn't giving up. Across the planet, people rallied together, donating supplies, volunteering for service, and offering whatever skills they had to support the war effort. Factories worked around the clock to produce weapons and equipment, while engineers fine-tuned existing ships for maximum efficiency. Journalists like Karen Blake broadcast stories of bravery and resilience, reminding everyone what they were fighting for. Even ordinary citizens found ways to contribute. In schools, children organized drives to collect scrap metal for recycling into parts. Farmers pooled their resources to send food to soldiers stationed on distant colonies. Everyone understood that this wasn't just a battle for military forces. It was a fight for humanity's future. As preparations continued, Ethan Cole and the U.S. Vanguard remained on the front lines, keeping watch over the Empire's movements. Though outnumbered and outgunned, humanity refused to back down. They had faced fear before, and they would face it again. But this time, they wouldn't just survive, they would win. And no matter how dark things got, they would keep laughing, because laughter was a sign of hope. Hope that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity would always find a way to rise above. The Galactic Empire wasted no time in showing its true colors. Just days after the tense standoff with Captain Ethan Cole and the U.S. Vanguard, Imperial forces launched a brutal attack on a remote human colony called New Haven. The colony was small, its defenses minimal compared to the Empire's massive warships. But the colonists weren't about to give up without a fight. When the first blasts shook the ground, alarms blared across the settlement. Pilots like Jake Thompson and Maria Lopez scrambled to their fighters, ready to defend their home. Jake was a seasoned pilot with quick reflexes, while Maria was known for her fearless flying. Together, they led a squadron of nimble ships into the sky, determined to hold off the invaders as long as possible. The battle was chaotic. Imperial ships loomed overhead, firing powerful beams that tore through buildings and left craters in the ground. But the human fighters darted between the larger vessels, using their speed and agility to avoid being hit. Jake and Maria worked seamlessly together, weaving through enemy fire and launching counterattacks. Their smaller ships couldn't match the firepower of the Empire's warships, but they didn't need to. By targeting weak points and exploiting gaps in the Imperial formation, they managed to inflict surprising damage. Back at Central Command on Earth, Admiral Laura Hayes watched the reports come in with growing concern. She knew New Haven couldn't hold out forever, but she also saw an opportunity. "They're overconfident," she said to her advisors. "They think we're easy targets because we're smaller. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." Orders were sent out immediately to reinforce the colony, and Captain Ethan Cole was directed to rush to New Haven's aid. Meanwhile, aboard the Imperial flagship, Commander Victor Drex paced anxiously. He hadn't expected such resistance from what he considered primitive beings. The humans should have surrendered or fled in terror, yet here they were, fighting back with determination. Reports from his captains only added to his frustration. Despite their superior numbers, the Empire was taking losses. Ships had been damaged, and several pilots had been shot down by the relentless human fighters. Maria spotted an opening during one of the skirmishes. A group of Imperial fighters had broken away from the main fleet, leaving their flank exposed. "Jake, follow me," she shouted over the comm channel. Without hesitation, Jake fell into position behind her, and together they swooped toward the vulnerable ships. Their lasers struck true, disabling 2 enemy fighters before the rest could react. Cheers erupted among the human pilots, knowing they had scored a small but meaningful victory. As the battle raged on, the colonists on the ground did everything they could to support the defense effort. Engineers patched up damaged ships mid-flight, allowing pilots to return to the fight quickly. Civilians helped evacuate wounded soldiers and set up makeshift shelters to protect themselves from falling debris. Even children played a role, handing out supplies and keeping morale high by cheering for the defenders. Finally, after hours of relentless fighting, the Empire's forces began to retreat. They hadn't achieved their goal of wiping out the colony, thanks to the bravery of the pilots and the resilience of the colonists. As the last Imperial ship disappeared into the distance, Jake and Maria landed their fighters, exhausted but triumphant. Smoke filled the air, and the colony was in ruins, but it still stood, and so did its people. Ethan arrived soon after, bringing reinforcements and medical supplies. He met Jake and Maria on the ground, shaking their hands firmly. "You two saved this place," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Jake shrugged modestly. "We just did what we had to do," he replied. Maria added, "And we'll keep doing it until they leave us alone." News of the battle spread quickly, inspiring others across human space. It proved that even against overwhelming odds, humanity could stand its ground. Back on Earth, Admiral Laura Hayes allowed herself a small smile. The Empire had underestimated them, and that mistake would cost them dearly. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to show the galaxy that they wouldn't be pushed around. And if laughter was the best way to unnerve their enemies, Then humanity would laugh all the way to victory. As the conflict with the Galactic Empire intensified, Dr. Daniel Carter worked tirelessly in his lab, determined to perfect the shield-disrupting weapon that could turn the tide of the war. Assisted by Lieutenant Emily Grant, he spent long hours analyzing data and running simulations. The pressure was immense, but Daniel refused to give up. He knew that humanity's survival depended on finding a way to counter the Empire's overwhelming technological advantage. One evening, as Emily adjusted the settings on their prototype device, something unexpected happened. The machine emitted a low hum, followed by a series of rapid beeps. Daniel froze, staring at the readings on the monitor. "Emily, look at this," he said, pointing to a specific frequency displayed on the screen. It matched the resonance pattern they had discovered in the stolen Imperial technology. "This isn't just a coincidence," Daniel muttered. "It's like their systems are built to respond to this exact signal." Emily leaned closer, her eyes widening as she processed the implications. "You're saying our weapon doesn't just disrupt their shields. It might actually interfere with their core systems?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Exactly. If we can amplify this frequency, we could disable entire ships without firing a single shot." Excitement bubbled between them, but they both knew there was still a lot of work to do before the weapon would be ready for battle. While Daniel and Emily focused on their invention, Admiral Laura Hayes authorized covert operations to gather more intelligence on the Empire. Operative Chris Bennett was sent back into enemy territory, this time disguised as a maintenance worker aboard an Imperial supply station. His mission was risky, but Chris had proven himself capable under pressure. Using forged credentials and a calm demeanor, he blended in seamlessly with the station's crew. Chris spent days observing the Empire's operations, taking note of their routines and gathering scraps of information. Late one night, while repairing a damaged console, he stumbled upon something extraordinary. Hidden within the station's logs were detailed schematics of the Empire's core technology that bore unmistakable similarities to human designs. Chris realized this wasn't just stolen knowledge. It was evidence of how deeply the Empire relied on humanity's innovations. Knowing he had struck gold, Chris copied the data onto a small drive and prepared to leave the station. But as he made his way toward the docking bay, alarms blared, signaling a security breach. Someone must have noticed his unauthorized access. Heart pounding, Chris sprinted through the corridors, narrowly avoiding patrols. Just as he reached his ship, a group of Imperial guards appeared, blocking his path. Thinking quickly, Chris activated a decoy explosion he had set earlier, creating enough chaos to slip past them and launch into space. When Chris returned to Earth, he handed the data over to Laura and her team. Daniel studied the schematics carefully, his mind racing with possibilities. "This confirms it," he said finally. "Their systems are based on our old designs. That's why our weapon works so well against them. They are using technology they don't fully understand." Laura nodded, her expression grim but hopeful. "Then we have to hit them where it hurts. Get this weapon ready, Doctor. We'll need it soon." Word of Chris' discovery spread quickly, boosting morale across human space. People began to see the Empire not as an unstoppable force, but as a bully relying on stolen ideas. Journalist Karen Blake highlighted these revelations in her broadcasts, emphasizing humanity's ingenuity and resilience. "They took what was ours, but they didn't count on us fighting back," she declared. "We're not just defending ourselves, we're reclaiming our future." On the front lines, Captain Ethan Cole and his crew prepared for the next phase of the war. Armed with new knowledge and renewed determination, they stood ready to face the Empire once again. Humanity had been pushed to its limits, but instead of breaking, it had grown stronger. Every setback only fueled their resolve to protect their freedom and prove that laughter in the face of tyranny wasn't just defiance, it was hope. And hope, they believed, would lead them to victory. With the shield-disrupting weapon nearly ready and new intelligence in hand, humanity prepared for a decisive confrontation with the Galactic Empire. Admiral Laura Hayes coordinated the efforts from Central Command, ensuring that every ship, soldier, and resource was in position for the upcoming battle. The stakes were high, but so was the determination of everyone involved. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. It was fighting to show the galaxy that they wouldn't back down. Captain Ethan Cole led the charge on the front lines, commanding the U.S. Vanguard and its fleet. His crew worked tirelessly to integrate Daniel Carter's prototype weapon into their ship's systems. Though the device was still experimental, early tests showed promising results. Lieutenant Rachel Monroe supervised the installation, double-checking every connection to ensure it would function during the heat of battle. "We've got one shot at this," she reminded her team. "Let's make sure it works." Meanwhile, pilots like Jake Thompson and Maria Lopes continued to harass Imperial forces, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could respond. Their daring maneuvers earned them nicknames like Ghost Squadron, striking fear into Imperial ranks. Stories of their bravery spread across human space, inspiring civilians and soldiers alike. Even children began drawing pictures of starships with bold slogans like, "We won't back down," and "Laugh in the face of fear." Back on Earth, journalist Karen Blake played a crucial role in boosting morale. Her broadcasts highlighted acts of heroism, from engineers working around the clock to farmers donating food for troops. She interviewed ordinary people who had stepped up to help, showing how unity was humanity's greatest strength. "This isn't just about soldiers or scientists," Karen said during one report. "Every single person has a part to play. Together, we're unstoppable." As preparations neared completion, Laura authorized a series of strategic strikes to weaken the Empire's grip on key sectors. Pilots armed with the new shield disruptor targeted Imperial supply lines and communication hubs, causing chaos within their ranks. Each successful mission brought humanity closer to evening the odds. Commander Victor Drex grew increasingly frustrated as his once dominant fleet struggled to maintain control. For the first time, cracks began to form in the Empire's facade of invincibility. On the ground, civilians rallied together in unprecedented ways. Factories operated 24 hours a day, producing weapons, shields, and spare parts for the war effort. Communities organized drives to collect materials, while volunteers trained to assist in evacuation efforts if needed. Even artists contributed, painting murals of defiant starships and writing songs that celebrated humanity's courage. Laughter became a symbol of resistance, a way to remind themselves and their enemies that fear wouldn't break them. The turning point came when Ethan led a daring raid on an Imperial stronghold. Using the shield disruptor, his fleet disabled the enemy's defenses, allowing human forces to strike deep into their territory. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as Imperial ships scrambled to respond. Jake and Maria flew side by side, taking out targets with precision. "They're falling apart," Maria shouted over the comm channel, her voice filled with triumph. Ethan watched as the Empire's forces retreated, their formation in disarray. Commander Drex watched the battle unfold from his flagship, his fists clenched in anger. He had underestimated humanity's ingenuity and resolve, and now he was paying the price. Reports poured in from across the Empire's territories. Allies were questioning their loyalty, and dissent brewed among his own officers. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving under pressure. When the dust settled, humanity emerged victorious in several key battles. Morale soared as people realized they could win. Admiral Laura Hayes addressed the public, praising the collective effort that had brought them this far. "This is what happens when we stand together," she said. "No matter how big the challenge, we find a way to overcome it. We laugh because we know we're stronger than anyone gives us credit for." As the galaxy looked on, humanity proved that laughter wasn't just defiance, it was hope. And hope, combined with courage and unity, was a force no empire could crush. Commander Victor Drex was not used to failure. For years, he had led the Galactic Empire's forces to victory after victory, crushing civilizations that dared to oppose them. But now, facing humanity, he felt something unfamiliar: doubt. The humans had proven themselves to be far more resourceful and resilient than he had anticipated. Their laughter, their defiance, and their ability to adapt infuriated him. He couldn't let this continue. If he failed to subdue Earth and its people, it would undermine the Empire's dominance across the galaxy. Drex devised a plan, a trap designed to lure the human fleet into a vulnerable position. Using false intelligence, he planted rumors of a weak Imperial supply line near the edge of human space. The bait was irresistible. Captain Ethan Cole and his crew aboard the U.S. Vanguard saw an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Empire. Unbeknownst to them, the supply line was a ruse, meant to draw them into a sector surrounded by hidden Imperial forces. As the Vanguard and its escorts entered the designated area, everything seemed normal at first. The crew scanned for enemy ships but found nothing unusual. Lieutenant Rachel Monroe monitored the sensors closely, her sharp eyes catching faint anomalies in the readings. "Captain," she said cautiously, "something doesn't feel right." Ethan nodded, sharing her unease, but the mission was too important to abandon without proof. They pressed forward, unaware they were walking straight into Drex's trap. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge as dozens of Imperial ships emerged from hiding, surrounding the human fleet. The situation looked dire. Outnumbered and outgunned, panic began to creep onto the faces of the crew. But Ethan remained calm. "Activate the shield disruptor," he ordered firmly. Rachel hesitated for a split second before relaying the command. Moments later, Daniel Carter's invention came to life, emitting a powerful frequency that rippled through space. The effect was immediate and devastating. Imperial ships shuddered as their shields collapsed, leaving them exposed. Cheers erupted on the Vanguard's bridge as the crew realized the weapon was working even better than expected. Jake Thompson and Maria Lopes wasted no time, leading squadrons of fighters to exploit the opening. Lasers streaked through space, targeting the now defenseless Imperial vessels. Explosions lit up the darkness as human forces pressed their advantage. On his flagship, Drex watched in disbelief as his carefully laid plans unraveled before his eyes. His mighty fleet, once thought invincible, was crumbling under the relentless assault. "How is this possible?" he muttered, gripping the edge of his command console. His officers scrambled to respond, but the humans were relentless. With their shields down, Imperial ships became easy targets, and chaos spread through their ranks. Ethan seized the moment, ordering the Vanguard to engage Drex's flagship directly. The two massive ships exchanged fire, their weapons lighting up the void between them. Despite the odds, Ethan's crew fought with precision and determination. Rachel coordinated evasive maneuvers while gunners targeted the flagship's weakened defenses. The battle raged for hours, each side refusing to yield. Finally, with heavy damage to his ship and losses mounting, Drex was forced to retreat. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but staying any longer would mean total destruction. As his flagship limped away from the battlefield, Drex clenched his fists in silent rage. Humanity had not only escaped his trap, they had turned it against him. For the first time, he began to question whether the Empire could truly conquer these stubborn, defiant beings. Back on the Vanguard, the mood was one of cautious triumph. The crew cheered and embraced, exhausted but proud of what they had achieved. Ethan stood quietly on the bridge, watching the wreckage of Imperial ships drift away. He knew this wasn't the end. The Empire wouldn't give up so easily. But it was a significant victory. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds and come out stronger. As news of the battle reached Earth, celebrations erupted across the planet. People poured into streets, waving flags and chanting slogans of defiance. Journalist Karen Blake captured the moment perfectly in her broadcast. "Today, we proved that laughter isn't just a sound, it's a weapon. We laugh because we know we can win. And no empire, no matter how big, will take that away from us." Humanity had taken another step towards securing its place among the stars. But the war was far from over, and everyone knew it. Still, for now, They allowed themselves to hope and to keep laughing. With their forces weakened but not defeated, the Galactic Empire made one last desperate attempt to crush humanity. Commander Victor Drex personally led a massive assault on Earth itself, determined to break humanity's spirit once and for all. It was a bold and reckless move, born out of frustration and desperation. Drex knew that if he could strike at the heart of human civilization, he might still salvage victory, or at least force them to surrender. As the Imperial fleet approached Earth, alarms blared across the planet. People scrambled to shelters while defense forces prepared for the fight of their lives. Admiral Laura Hayes coordinated the response from Central Command. Her voice steadied despite the chaos around her. "This is it," she told her team. "We've trained for this moment. Now we show them what humanity is made of." Every available ship, soldier, and resource was mobilized to defend the planet. In orbit, Captain Ethan Cole and the U.S. Vanguard stood ready to face the Empire's full might. The crew worked tirelessly, checking weapon systems and preparing for battle. Jake Thompson and Maria Lopez led squadrons of fighters, their ships armed with the shield-disrupting technology that had turned the tide in previous battles. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever. If they failed, Earth would fall. The battle began with a barrage of fire from the Imperial fleet. Massive beams tore through the atmosphere, striking cities and military installations below. Explosions rocked the surface, sending plumes of smoke into the sky. Civilians huddled in underground bunkers, praying for survival. Yet even amid the destruction, humanity refused to give up. Soldiers and volunteers fought back fiercely, using guerrilla tactics to slow the Empire's advance. On the ground, ordinary citizens joined the effort. Families turned basements into makeshift hospitals, treating wounded fighters and civilians alike. Teenagers carried messages between resistance groups, risking their lives to keep communication lines open. Even children helped by gathering supplies or comforting scared neighbors. Everyone played a part, no matter how small, united by a shared determination to protect their home. In space, Ethan and his crew engaged Drex's flagship in a fierce duel. The two massive ships exchanged fire, each blast shaking the hulls violently. Lieutenant Rachel Monroe coordinated evasive maneuvers, her hands flying over the controls as she tried to keep the Vanguard intact. Meanwhile, gunners fired relentlessly, targeting the flagship's weakened shields. The battle raged for hours, neither side willing to retreat. Jake and Maria led their squadrons with unmatched skill, weaving through enemy fire to disable Imperial ships. Their smaller vessels darted around like sparks in the darkness, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could respond. Pilots cheered over the comm channel as they took down one ship after another. "Keep pushing," Maria shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We're almost there." Back on Earth, Admiral Laura Hayes watched the battle unfold with bated breath. Reports poured in from every corner of the globe, stories of bravery and sacrifice that reminded her why humanity would never bow to tyranny. Journalist Karen Blake broadcast live updates, her voice trembling with emotion as she described the scene. "They're hitting us hard," she said, "but we're hitting back harder. This is our planet, and we will defend it to the last breath." Finally, after days of relentless fighting, the Empire's forces began to falter. Their ships were damaged, their crews exhausted, and their commander losing hope. Drex stared at the screens in his command center, his mind racing. He had underestimated humanity again, and now he faced defeat. With a heavy heart, he gave the order to withdraw. The Imperial fleet retreated, leaving behind a battered but unbroken Earth. As the dust settled, people emerged from shelters, surveying the damage but also celebrating their survival. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge yet, and won. Ethan looked down at Earth from the Vanguard's viewport, his chest swelling with pride. They had proven that laughter wasn't just defiance, it was strength, and no empire, no matter how powerful, could take that away from them. In the aftermath of the battle, the Galactic Empire had no choice but to sue for peace. Commander Victor Drex, humiliated and defeated, reluctantly agreed to withdraw all Imperial forces from human space. The Empire's once mighty fleet limped back to its territory, leaving behind a galaxy that now saw humanity in a new light. For the first time, the Empire had been forced to back down, and everyone knew who was responsible. On Earth, celebrations erupted across the planet. Cities lit up with fireworks, and crowds gathered in streets and squares, cheering and singing. People hugged strangers, tears streaming down their faces as they realized what they had achieved. Humanity had faced an overwhelming enemy and emerged victorious not through sheer power, but through unity, ingenuity, and unshakable determination. Journalist Karen Blake captured the mood perfectly in her final broadcast. Today, we prove that courage isn't just about weapons or ships. It's about standing together, no matter how dark things get. Admiral Laura Hayes addressed the world from Central Command, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She praised the bravery of every individual who had played a part in the war effort, from pilots like Jake Thompson and Maria Lopez to scientists like Dr. Daniel Carter and technicians like Lieutenant Emily Grant. "This victory belongs to all of us," she said firmly. "Every person on this planet contributed in their own way, and together, we showed the galaxy that humanity will never bow to fear or tyranny." Captain Ethan Cole returned to Earth a hero, though he remained humble. Standing alongside Rachel Monroe and the rest of his crew, he reflected on how far humanity had come. They had faced challenges that seemed impossible to overcome, yet they had risen to meet them head-on. Ethan looked out at the crowd gathered to welcome him home. Ordinary people whose resilience and spirit had carried them through the darkest days of the war. He felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that humanity wasn't defined by its technology or weapons, but by its heart. Dr. Daniel Carter and Emily Grant continued working in their lab, refining the shield-disrupting weapon and exploring new ways to protect humanity from future threats. Though the immediate danger had passed, they knew the galaxy was vast and unpredictable. Their work would ensure that humanity remained prepared for whatever came next. Meanwhile, operatives like Chris Bennett stayed vigilant, gathering intelligence to prevent another surprise attack. As life slowly returned to normal, people began rebuilding what had been lost. Cities scared by battle were reconstructed, stronger and more resilient than before. Schools reopened, farmers returned to their fields, and artists created works inspired by the war, a testament to humanity's ability to find beauty even in struggle. Children played outside again, their laughter echoing through neighborhoods as if reminding everyone that hope was alive and well. Ethan often found himself looking up at the stars, thinking about the lessons humanity had learned. The war had shown them that they weren't alone in the universe, but it had also shown them that they belonged among the stars. They had proven they could stand shoulder to shoulder with any civilization, no matter how advanced, and they had done it without losing sight of who they were, a species capable of kindness, creativity, and courage. One evening, as Ethan stood on a hill overlooking his hometown, Rachel joined him. "Do you think they'll try again?" she asked quietly, gazing at the night sky. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe," he replied. "But if they do, we'll be ready. We've faced worse than them, and we've laughed in the face of it." Rachel smiled, nodding in agreement. "You're right," she said, "and we'll keep laughing, no matter what comes next." The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but humanity had proven it belonged among the stars. They had fought not just for survival, but for freedom, for the right to chart their own course in the cosmos. And as long as they kept believing in themselves, they would continue to rise above any challenge. After all, laughter wasn't just defiance, it was hope. And hope was something no empire could ever take away.